Morning, gang. I wasn't sure if I was going to do a video on this truck, but I guess I will. This is a 95 Ford F-150 and belongs to a friend of mine, and she was driving it the other day and hit the brakes and it started making a severe grinding noise. And so I went and picked it up this morning and drove it over here, and of course it is making a grinding noise, and I'm hearing a lot from this left front. So I'm going to pull the wheels off of it, check the brakes, and I know I'm already going to have to replace some stuff, but I want to show you the steps that I take to do that. Alright, as you can see, I have the truck jacked up, and I have the tire and wheel off, and I have a jack stand in place. I'm going to remove the caliper, and I want to show you something here which I think is just a little different. Ford put in these compression lock pins. Now normally you'd have a bolt on the backside holding the caliper to the bracket that it's mounted to, but Ford came up with this idea of these compression type of pins, and really it's different and it works, but I'd rather have a bolt assembly in place. And so what I'm going to have to do is remove those pins. Now to do that, there's a little bit of a little shoulder right here on both of these pins, and if I take a screwdriver, I can tap it and get it to release and go in a little bit like that. Let's see if I can get this other one. And the idea is there's a rubber kind of a, I don't know, I want to say a bushing or something, but a piece of rubber on the inside that's pushing those apart, and so you have to compress that a little bit and get that out. Now I could take the screwdriver and just basically tap that all the way out, or I could use this, which is a tool that I made, and at least get it back inside there. Now what I'm going to have to do is get that all the way out, and there it is to the back, and there you can see what I'm talking about. There's like a piece of rubber inside of this thing, and it has to compress. So what I'll do is I've removed this one, and there's another one, whoops, down at the bottom. I'll get that one out, and then the caliper will slide off. Alright, I have both of those pins removed, and now I'm working on getting the caliper off of the bracket. So I'm just prying a little bit back and forth with a screwdriver to get some leverage, get that out of the way, and you can see the front caliper, or front brake pad, stayed attached to the caliper. And what I'll do, I should be able to tap that, break it loose. So definitely worn down, and that merits replacement. So I'll take the inner pad out and get a look at it, and I can see that it's completely shot. I mean, it's not metal to metal, but it's definitely bad. So at this point I will pause on this side and move on to the passenger side and check it and make sure that the rotor is not damaged. Now in this case, I know from looking at the pad that the rotor's in great shape, and it shows no real ridging. It's nice and smooth transition, and I'm comfortable with the back side as well. Really nice. So I'll move to the passenger side, double check it, and then move on to getting a new set of pads. So I got to look at the passenger side, and I determined that the rotor's bad, the inner pad has dug into it, and I'll have to replace that. And I'll show you how I'm going to do that in just a minute. But I went to the parts store to Advance, and I picked up a new rotor, a set of gold premium brake pads, and an inner bearing seal for the rotor assembly. Here's the list of parts. Now you can see it says CarQuest, but CarQuest was bought out by Advance Auto Parts. So basically that's what I have tied up in parts, and I do get a small discount, so maybe just a little bit more if you were to buy these. I am going to reuse the bearings from the other rotor. There's nothing wrong with them. They're not making any noise. and the rotor comes with the races already installed, the inner and the outer. So I will take that apart and clean those up and reuse them, repack them and reuse them. At this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to compress the right side caliper so that I can replace the pads. Now, you only want to do one side at a time, because if you try to compress the one caliper and the other one is off, you will extend the piston and blow it out. So that's why I have this one mounted back on. So now I'll show you the basic steps for that. I have this little compressor tool, and I've shown this before in my other videos. This one just says AC Delco on it, but it's just a caliper compression tool. And you can use different things. You can use a C-clamp, you can use vice grips, whatever. And this is just nice and simple. I will put that in, put the pad in place, and crank it down. And basically, you go slowly, allow the piston time to compress and the fluid to retract back up into the master cylinder. So I'll just continue to put pressure on that, give it a second to relax, and so on. And there the piston is fully retracted back into the main body of the caliper. And when you're doing this, you also want to double check your brake fluid levels. This was at about the midpoint whenever I started, and of course you can see the fluid has come back in, and I don't think I'll have any issues with excessive fluid. Sometimes people will over service the brakes or the brake system, and you have to recover some of that fluid if you have too much in there. And I usually use like a turkey baster, and I'll suck some of the fluid out, just go inside and suck it up and take it away. So just a little tip for you. Okay, so now I have the piston compressed back into the caliper. I'm going to reassemble everything. I'm going to start with the outer pad, push that on the caliper, and the inner pad is going to go in the bracket. Now these things, there's only one way it'll fit, so you really can't mess these up. Rotate and slip the caliper on, get everything lined up, and then these little pins that we took out earlier, I'm going to reinsert those. And you can see they've got kind of a fat edge on them, and then a narrower, and that narrower edge will go up basically on the top one, and it'll go down on the bottom one. So just get that tapped in. I'm going to follow it up a little bit with that tool that I made. And then the bottom one, like I said, the narrow edge will go down in this case. So get that lined up, get that in place. And there it is. Not really hard to do, but just a little more effort, you know, to get these pins out. But that'll take care of the driver's side. Now I'll take apart the passenger side and get it done as well. Okay, I'm back on the passenger side, and it looks like somebody's already kind of beat up this dust cap, so I might have a little trouble getting it off. But basically you would take a screwdriver, a very thin screwdriver, and get behind the edge. We'll work on getting some separation there. Twisting the screwdriver. Looks like somebody has used a variety of tools to try to get this off before. But basically, remove that cap, and it exposes your bearing in the grease. Now I can look at this and I can see that there's obviously a lot of grease on here, but there's my ends of my pin. So So I'm going to straighten out the pin. Hopefully it doesn't break so I can reuse it. And it just broke. Figures. So get the pin out of the way, or what's left of it. I'll have to replace that with another pin. There you go. You can see that. And then there's a cage that goes over the nut, and that cage is what the pin goes into. That's what has all these little slots cut in it, and this keeps the pin from rotating. And then I'm going to grab onto the main nut itself and release tension on it. Now this one's not very tight, and they don't need to be very tight. They just have to be compressed enough to keep tension on the bearing. So there's the nut, and basically wiggle the rotor a little bit, and you get the retainer with little tabs in it that makes it line up on the shaft. And there's the bearing. And I think I may end up going back and getting a new set of bearings. I don't think whoever did this had it very tight, and so I'm seeing a wear pattern on the cage assembly. So I guess I'll go get some new bearings. Okay, what you have here is the new rotor, and that is the seal that's going to go on top of the bearing, and this is a new bearing. And of course these need to be packed. Now normally I have a little bearing packer that I use, but I'm going to show you my hand technique, which is the normal technique that was used for years and years and years by shops. And basically you put some grease in the palm of your hand, and you swipe the edge into that, and it forces the grease up into the actual bearings themselves. And you just want to do that over and over and over, and you go on around and then turn it over and do the opposite side. And once you see the grease coming out of the little bearing cage, you know you've got enough in there. So I'll pack this one and the other one, and then I'll drive on and show you what I'm going to do next. Okay, now that I have both bearings packed, I've also put some grease on the bearing race itself. I'm going to take this new bearing, set it in place, and then the next part is putting on the seal. Now I'm going to use a brass hammer and gently tap this in. Now it takes a little effort sometimes to get it to line up and catch, but once it catches, because it's a tight fit, otherwise it wouldn't seal. You can hear it, sounds like a dull thud while it's going in. You can hear it get to a sharp type of sound whenever it's bottomed out. That's from the hammer making contact with the rotor assembly. Okay, that takes care of putting in the inner bearing. Alright, so I've cleaned up the spindle, and I've got my bearing installed like I showed. So I'm going to install the rotor assembly, and I've already put more grease on the bearing race for the outer bearing, and of course it's been packed. So put that in place, and then you just reverse the order. So there's that little washer, and I talked about it has tabs basically that align it. Put that in place, and then the main nut. Now this is the part you got to play with just a little bit. because you don't just want to tighten that nut up like you're trying to tighten a lug nut, because you're putting tension on the bearing surfaces. So as I rotate this, the grease moves around a little bit, and I will rotate the nut just slightly to put tension on that bearing. And then I'll move it around some more, and I'll double check that tension, and that feels pretty good. There's no wiggle, and it's turning nicely, so I'm comfortable with that, where that is. Then you're going to take that little cage nut I talked about and install it. Now the slot needs to be in line with the hole on the shaft for the cotter pin. So put that in place. Once the cage nut's in place, then you install the cotter pin and rotate the ends so it keeps the cage nut from turning. And that's basically all it takes to change out the rotor. I'm going to rotate that up just a little bit more. Now, you could pack a bunch of grease in there, but it's not going to help. The grease, it's on the bearing surfaces. The grease doesn't move in and out. It doesn't change position. So there's plenty of grease on it at this point. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is install this dust cover. And I went and replaced the one that was on it because that one was really damaged. So just take that cover. It'll take a little bit of effort to get it to drop on there. Again, it's a pinch fit. And that's basically it, and that'll take care of changing out the rotor. So at this point, I'll compress the piston in the caliper like I did on the other side, and install the pads, and put the caliper back on, and that'll take care of doing the brakes on this, which is actually a 92. I thought it was a 95. It's a 92 F-150. And there it is with everything assembled. Took a little more work than I wanted it to be, but I was hoping I could maybe salvage the brake rotor, but it really wasn't worth, say, getting it turned. It looked like it had been turned before, and for the price, it was worth it just to buy a new one. So that's what I did. Hopefully you get something out of this video, and again, thank you for watching.